Setting goals in any business is important, but should we be setting goals based on metrics alone, or should we be setting our goals based on our personal needs, wants, and the direction of our business? Today we're going to answer just that question with Krista Marie. Krista is a photographer, business coach, and creator of the She Calls Her Shots podcast. She helps creatives and photographers ditch the overwhelm and create thriving businesses by focusing on the tactical strategies, habits, and mindset that you need to succeed. Her passion is to take complicated business strategies and goals and break them down into tiny, actionable steps to help you build a sustainable business. Welcome to Bloggers Creating Courses, the podcast which will take you behind the scenes of creating an online course. I'm your host, Verity Songon, founder and education consultant of veritysongon.com. I'm so excited to help you create an online course that you are proud of and to be part of your journey to scale your business as an online course creator. Let's get into the episode. Krista, thank you so much for being with us today. I am so excited to have you here. We have got so much that we're going to talk about, and it's a fantastic episode. But before we get started, I'm going to hand over to you. Tell us who you are, what it is that you do. Tell us all the stuff about you.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, Verity, thank you so much for having me on today. A little bit about me. So my name is Krista. I live in Northern California, so kind of in the San Francisco Bay Area. I actually grew up in Florida and lived there for about 21 years and then moved to the West Coast, which was a very big move in general. But I have been for the last 12 years a wedding and a brand photographer. And in the last 2 years or so, I have started doing coaching. I started a podcast for other business owners. So that's a little bit about kind of me, who I am.
And that's kind of how I know you I feel like I know you is through listening to your podcast. And even though this is the first time we've met, you've been in my car an awful lot. Most weeks a new episode comes out. A new episode comes out and you're on the car radio so I can listen to you.
I'm so honored.
And one of the things that you talked about recently on your podcast was this idea of goal setting and not being led by the metrics of goal setting, which I thought was brilliant when it comes to online courses. But to start off, I'm going to ask you, how do you define goal setting and why is goal setting so important for an online business?
Yeah, so I think that this is such an important topic because we kind of see other people's goals, but not like clearly defined. I think when we follow other people on social media, we see all the big moves that they're doing, all like the launches, the new products, like the new clients, all these big things. And we kind of just get this idea in our head that like, oh, that's going to be my goal. I'm going to launch this or I'm going to do this. And then our head immediately goes into, okay, what are the metrics? What are the numbers? What are the things that I'm going to need to be able to match what it is that I'm seeing this other person do? And so for me, I feel like what I've learned over time and what I'm still continuing to learn is that for me, what I found is much more relevant to help me grow a business is focusing on what is it that I want to do in the next, 6 to 12 months, maybe even longer. If some people, I think with goal setting, it can come a little bit easier, like figuring out where you want to be in a year. For some people, figuring out where you want to be in a year can be really difficult. But if you feel like you can think 6 to 12 months ahead, maybe even ask yourself, where do I want to be in 2, 3, 5 years? What do I want my business to look like? And then really getting clear on figuring out what you need to focus on, the actual tasks that you need to do to get you there. Because I found that for me, I found myself spinning in circles, always trying to hit these basically vanity metrics, things that felt really good, things that I thought would like make me look more professional. But what I found is that I got so lost in chasing those metrics that I wasn't focusing on the actual core things that were actually going to move me forward and like actually help me build the business that I wanted. So that's why I feel like when you can find and create your goals based on your values and like how you want to show up, what you want your business to look like, that's going to be so much more relevant and help you build a sustainable business than just focusing on those quick metrics and numbers.
Absolutely. And I love what you say there about sustainability as well, because we do live in this real data and social media kind of driven world. And, it's so easy to log onto Instagram and see that someone's uploaded another reel and thinking reactively, oh gosh, I have to put another reel
Mm-hmm.
up, or I need to do whatever it is on social media. And then you're right, by the time we've done that, it's probably a couple of hours later. And then you're thinking, I've been really busy, but what have I done that's actually contributed to my business?
Yeah.
Book. When we're working in the online space, it's really easy to get caught up with those analytics, thinking, how many followers have I got? How many likes did my last post get? How many course sales am I going to make? How many bookings have I got? Consultation calls, whatever it is. But we just generally get caught up in all that information available to us. How can we focus on setting goals which focus on us and our business rather than the metrics?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to kind of drop a little truth bomb here, which I think is that it's a lot easier. It's still hard, but it's a lot easier to kind of get lost in this busy work, the shiny objects, the things that make us feel like we were busy all day, but like didn't actually move the needle forward. Because when we think about it, like when we think about growing a business, right? The things that we think of are like, ooh, I'm going to create a website. Like, oh, I'm going to create my brand colors. Oh, I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to make reels. I'm going to grow Instagram followers. And we think of all the like the fun things and the fun parts of growing a business. And then when someone actually, like, let's say you run into someone on the street and they're like, oh my gosh, what do you do? And then you like freeze because you're like, oh, I guess I don't really know. Haven't really sat down to like define what is that? Like, who is my ideal client? Like, what is it that I want to do? How do I want to serve people? Like, what offers or what things am I creating? But we like spend so much time in everything else that we kind of get lost in that. So I feel like the best advice that I have is being able to sit back and really sit with yourself, kind of lean into the slowness of the beginning of building a business and like dial into the activities that are actually going to help you get to where you want to go. So, because like you said earlier, Verity, when like I became like the queen of busy because I was doing so many things. I felt so productive during the day and like my schedule was jam packed. I had so many things that I was doing. And I did definitely have a day where I woke up and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to share a reel on Instagram today. It took me 3 hours to get it right. And then it was after lunch, my whole day was gone. I was like, I literally did nothing to move my business forward today. So I feel like to help you, if you feel like you're constantly kind of getting pulled into these like numbers and metrics and like business growth, the first thing I want to kind of encourage you to remember is that like you don't need a big audience. Like you really don't need a big audience. For example, on Instagram, I might have 2,000 followers. Do you know how many people see my story on an average basis? 75 people. Like 75 people. And I'm being completely honest with you, 75 to 100. Like that's how many people are seeing my stories. So I could spend all this time spinning my wheels and I've done this. Like I'm going to have this perfect launch. I'm going to talk about this thing that I'm doing. 75 people are seeing it. But you know what? Like it in the past, I used to look at that as like, I'm not reaching enough people. I'm not growing. I'm not doing all this. But you know what, though? Those 75 people are actively engaged all the time in my DMs or like talking to me or commenting on my posts. And it's like, it's taking a step back to realize like that metric literally means nothing. And I'm going to focus on that one for a second because I think we get really caught up in Instagram followers. Because even me, sometimes I'll look at people who have been photographers the same amount of time as me and they've got like, I don't know, thousands, like hundreds of thousands of followers or like however many 19, 20,000 followers. But then I'll remind myself, well, first of all, you can go to any of their posts, right? Maybe like 200 people like it, 300 people like it. And again, you remind yourself, like whatever that big number is, whatever that big metric is that they're chasing, like a limited number of people are seeing this. So why am I tying my worth as a business owner, my growth? Why am I tying it to this number that at the end of the day literally means nothing? So that was a big one for me because I found myself getting caught in that a lot. But I really think just taking that step back and like getting really comfortable with yourself. I think it's so easy to look at others and compare like how they're doing and the metrics that they have. But we have to remember that like every single person started from nothing. Like we have to remember that. And so your goals should feel very personal to you. They should feel like something that's going to make you happy because otherwise you're going to spend so much time chasing this like vanity metrics, this success like that other people are having and get lost in what it is that you actually want your life to look like. And I know because I've been there.
Absolutely. And I love what you said there about taking that step back and actually thinking to yourself, well, how many people are seeing this post and what value is this even bringing? Actually thinking, well, what does this number mean for me as an individual and
Mhm.
what does it mean for my business? Because like you said, if you're not getting the engagement from 19,000 followers, then
Then
yeah,
why does
exactly.
that number even matter?
So for our listeners, what advice do you have around setting goals which are achievable and relevant to their individual businesses?
Yeah. So I think first things first is figuring out like what's important to you and who you want to be and how you want to show up in your business. Because again, I think that when we start chasing these big goals, we get really lost in like our all of a sudden our whole day we're booked up with things to do, and like our relationships, our priorities, our self-care, all of that gets pushed to the wayside. So I think just sitting down to figure out, and I think that this might come in seasons too. You might have one season where you're like, you know what, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a growth season. I've got a lot of energy and I've got some extra time. So I'm going to be working a little bit more, totally fine. But then also figuring out maybe you're not in a season. Maybe it's beautiful weather and summer and activities and like all these things that are happening. So recognizing that it's impractical to like have all of these crazy big goals while you also have a lot of life happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing, one of the things I love to do for myself for figuring out like what goals are actually important to me is, again, kind of thinking of where you want to be 6 months, 12 months, a few years in, figuring out, okay, what are those tasks that I need to be doing and actually focusing on? So, for example, if you are, I'm going to use a photographer just because like I've done this recently for myself. If you're a photographer, right, I found myself getting lost in the, oh, I'm going to buy all these courses. I'm going to like purchase all these things, right? What I wasn't doing was I wasn't just like connecting with people on Instagram. I wasn't just like engaging with people. Like I wasn't going out to events and like introducing myself and telling people, like I wasn't doing all of the things that would actually help me build a market. I was doing all the things that was just like consume, consume, consume.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think first of all, just kind of figuring out what tasks are actually going to be the things that are going to help me put myself out there and grow, because those are sometimes the harder things to do. But then once you figure that out, my favorite way I always kind of talk about this in like brain mapping. So the way that I love to do it is I get like a big oversized piece of paper. I get out like my favorite markers, and I suggest doing it on paper and markers because I like the computer is just doesn't work the same. So grab a piece of paper, grab your favorite markers. And then, so do like a big bubble in the middle. That's like, this is going to be like your main goal. This is what you want to focus on. So, for example, the example I always use is like, if you were like, I want to build an email list, maybe that's like your big center goal. And then outside of that big circle, you start branching out a couple of lines and you make some smaller bubbles. And okay, so what are the big milestones that I have to do to be able to make an email list? Well, I need to, be able to like I need to have a freebie or like a lead magnet that I'm going to send out. I need to like have uh, an email platform that I'm going to use. I need to be able to send out the emails. I need to know what I'm talking about. I need to know what types of content I'm sharing. So you start to kind of figure out that next step. And then going even further into that next step. So, okay, I need to have an email platform. Okay, I need to like figure out what email platforms are there? Like, how much do they cost? So, like, breaking down your goals into small things so that way you're not trying to accomplish everything at the same time. Because I know for me, coming from a place where I worked full time while growing my business, my timeline for things were like, I need to get everything done right now. And I would try to like sit down and accomplish all of these tasks at the exact same time. Or I would sit down and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to create my email list today. And then I'd have zero clarity. Like it would take me so long to actually get work done because it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, what am I actually working on today? And so it's like when we actually take the time to break down each of our goals into the smallest action items so that every day, if you just cross off one task, like before you know it, you'll have already like accomplished the goals. You may not have 1,000 people on your email list. Like, so I suggest like create an email list and send it out to people, right? Like have that be your main bubble, not like have 1,000 people, because that might take time to do it. But how accomplished will you feel when you've crossed off all those things, you've sent it out, even if there's one person on your list and you're like, I just sent out my first email. Like that's such an exciting feeling.
Absolutely. And there's two things I'm going to pick up on what you just said then. The first one is we are clearly just born of the same mind, because my entire business is, I don't have a business plan. I have a giant A2 sheet of paper, which is sat beside me. If we were on YouTube, I'd pull it out and show you right now. But there is a giant sheet of paper which has got a bubble in the middle, which is my business name, and I've done exactly that. I have gone around with smaller bubbles as to, you know, the podcast has got its own bubble, my mastermind course has got its own bubble, everything has got its own bubble, and from that they're all branched out as to, well,
Love
what am I
that.
going to do to achieve that? So it's not just the podcast is not, well, the podcast is an overall goal, but it's not just podcast. It's, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to get these guests and I want to cover these topics, and these are the people that I'm reaching out to. Right, well, how am I going to get those guests? What steps do I need to take? So it's constantly just working backwards. So first of all, yes, we are completely of the same mind there. I've got all of my coloured Sharpies, which it's all categorized in color. It's all
Love it.
so beautiful. The other thing, I kind of wish we were doing a YouTube video now just so I could pull it out and show
so
you.
funny.
And
And we didn't plan that at all. Like, I didn't even tell you what I was going to talk about.
Absolutely. I might like take a picture of it later and send it to you.
So funny.
But the other thing that I want to pick up on, which I've scribbled down as you were talking there, is I wrote down plan before platform, because you were talking about how you've got to make sure that you've got that strategy in place before you go out and kind of purchase a load of bits and pieces. And I loved what you were saying about the email plan and marketing platform there, particular, because we get so bombarded. We know that having an email list is important. We know that having a newsletter is great for not just getting people and an audience into our kind of circle, but for retaining them and keeping them there as well. But we also know that there is so much information out there of, go for this platform. No, wait, this one's better. No, this one's better. And before you know it, you've spent what feels like, goodness knows how much time, weeks sometimes, just hopping between all these platforms. But not once have you actually done anything about creating a list. It's 3 months later, you still have got maybe 1 or 2 subscribers only, and you haven't put out your first newsletter, as you said. So I think that idea of having your plan in place, because what's the point in spending $10, $100, however much it is per month on a subscription to a platform, whatever it might be, if it's your email platform, your online course platform, a membership, whatever it is, there's no point paying out if that platform is just staying dormant and you've not got a plan to actually build it up and achieve anything there.
Well, and I think it's so easy for us because we kind of get lost. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, I get lost in like the marketing of things. Like you go onto their email marketing platform and they talk about all these endless possibilities, and immediately like, oh, I'm sold. And I immediately think that I'm gonna by purchasing this platform, it's gonna magically transport me to wherever it is that I want to go. But like you said, it's so easy, and I find this a lot, that like we purchase the platform, we don't know what content we're going to share. Like you actually sit down to write your first email and you're like, I don't know what to share. I don't know what to talk about. Like what? And it's like, that's the stuff that I think we need to really, that's what you want to work on first, because it's really easy to go out and purchase all the things thinking that they'll just like magically get you to where you want to go. But it's similar to when I even launched my podcast. I mean, thankfully, there wasn't a lot of startup costs. I mean, I bought my mic and I think I spent however much on my hosting platform each month. So it wasn't really that much of a startup cost, but the real struggle hit after I was doing it for like 2 or 3 months. And I realized like I kind of had to shift the way like my content, like I had to come up with new content. And it really put me in this position where I had to sit and figure out like, okay, who is my audience? What am I sharing? Like I had to get really clear on that. And that's the harder thing to do than just like buying things that we think are going to like, again, like kind of help us get to that place where we want to go without having to put in the work. So I think, yeah, it's like, it's amazing if you want to create a course. It's amazing if you want to have a membership. It's amazing. And like, there are platforms out there that, you know, you can start with that don't require a lot of kind of startup. I think the bigger question is when you get that first person, second person, third person, like, what is it that you're sharing? Like, what is it that makes you unique? What is the value that you're providing? And you really have to get clear on that ahead of time. And again, I think a lot of that sits down with like kind of looking in a mirror at yourself and being like, who am I? What are my values? What's important to me? And like, how am I going to show up in a way that feels good to me? Because we're in this for the long run. And like, we have to like, you want to start a business that's going to feel like it's in alignment with where you actually want to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And you've reminded me of somebody that I worked with actually previously, and they had kind of got, I think, a little bit into the whole shiny object syndrome, for want of a better phrase, where they had found this course platform, which is kind of one of the big five top, platforms that a lot of people have. And they went and bought one of the highest pricing plans on it, and over the course of about 3-4 months spent upwards of $1,000 on this platform. And then I spoke to them about 3 months in, and he turned around to me and he said, yeah, I don't understand what I'm doing wrong, because I'm not making any money. And I was like, okay, let's backpedal, let's break this down. And he didn't even have a course to go on. He was like, I've bought the software. And I was like, but you've not got a product. So let's
Mm-hmm.
break this down. Let's take it back to the beginning. And we got there. We got a course together, and that was all working out fine. But it was just, he completely got taken up on exactly what you're saying there. This idea that, and he was like, but I've spent about $1,000 and it says that it's got this functionality and it says that it's got that functionality. And I was like, it does have those things, but you're not utilizing them. And
Mm-hmm.
giving the platform the best part of $1,000 isn't going to make you any money, because, like I said, you're not selling anything on the
Yeah.
platform. And I think it's really important. It keeps coming back. We've said this about 3 times now. It keeps coming back to what you said right at the beginning, is having not just a goal in place, but a plan and how you are going to achieve that goal, and making sure
Mm-hmm.
that that goal is realistic. Yeah.
Yeah. And making sure that the things that are going to get you there are like the impactful things. Because I know for me, when I was like, for example, when I was launching, well, really my photography business, I mean, I can't even tell you, I bought a sales course, a Pinterest course, a marketing course.
We've all
Like,
been there.
I mean, literally name a course, like I've purchased it. And not that they weren't helpful to a certain extent, but like, were they actually helping me to get to where I want to go? No, because I was like kind of branching out myself into all of these different places and not really sitting with myself to say like, okay, what would actually be the impactful thing? Tell people what I do, be really clear in what I do and who I serve, and like talk about that a lot. Like that's, I could have taken my marketing course and my selling course and like broken it down into the most simplest steps. And if I just showed up and continue doing that over time, right? Like, of course, courses are helpful, but I guess if you're just starting off or if you're kind of in the beginning phase, like I think it's important to know that there's a little bit of a balance of like you're going to always feel like there's more to learn. So don't feel like you have to purchase all the things to become this like expert and then all of a sudden you'll be ready to do whatever it is that you want to do.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much value in that as well, because it's remembering that, well, what you said before, it's remembering what your core values are, and actually sitting down and, well, why did I start this business? Did I start this business to go down a Pinterest rabbit hole, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or an Instagram rabbit hole, or whatever it is? And let's face it, I'm just like you. I've done exactly that. I've bought, all those different courses, because I'm like, right, this month I really want to focus on my Pinterest, or this month I want to know how to accelerate my Facebook group, or whatever that kind of my theme was, that was most likely led by social media as to why I ended up buying that course in the first place. But it's what value is that bringing to you and to your business at that particular point in time. And I think it's also worth remembering that you don't have to do everything yourself. You might have somebody who's in your circle who's actually got no problem with helping you out with whatever it is. I spoke to somebody recently who, they had, I think it was a friend who helped with the admin side of the
Mm-hmm.
business, just because they enjoyed doing that. Or it's also remembering that some of the people who, you might not realize it, but they employ a Pinterest manager, for example, or they outsource their social media or their bookkeeping or whatever it is. I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, but it's just remembering that you don't have to do everything
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And
Yeah.
if you are trying to do everything yourself, then either congratulations, or you might be heading for a road of burnout. So it's
Yeah.
about striking the balance, really.
Definitely. And I think, like, starting off, I know, for example, before I had outsourced anything, there were definitely things that just fell by the wayside, like things that didn't get done. Like, I was not taking care of my books, as like every time it was tax time, here I am, like grabbing all of my papers and numbers and like putting everything together. Right. And so I think it's, again, it's about sitting down and really getting honest with yourself, because it's so easy to look at other people. Well, this person outsources this and this person has a team for this, and it becomes really easy to start spending money that we're not
Hmm.
making. And
Yeah.
it's just remembering that, like, you don't have to do everything, but again, sitting down to figure out, okay, what are my goals? Like, maybe your focus right now is that you want to make more money. In that case, I would suggest maybe don't outsource everything, but figure out, are there some things that could be beneficial for me to outsource that is in my budget, right? But
Hmm.
not feeling that pressure of, like you said, someone that you look at online could have an entire like social media manager that does all of their posts that they could be spending thousands of dollars on. So, like, don't compare your Instagram to their Instagram as like
Hmm.
an apples to apples comparison. And just getting really honest about, like, yeah, how do I want to spend my time? Because truthfully, I could manage a lot of this stuff myself, but I'd be spending all day every day, and I've done this like seasons where all of a sudden I'm just working nonstop, and like immediately, like 2 months in, I'm burnt out, and then all of a sudden I'm taking a 3-week break where I'm not doing anything in my business because I literally can't focus on anything. And all I had known for the longest time were these cycles of, like, do everything myself, go all in, work really hard, burnout, and then repeat the cycle, do it all over again. And so I'm actually just starting to kind of embrace this, like, not that I'm not creating timelines, but like I'm creating timelines that are 6 months out. So, like, what is it that I want to accomplish in the next 6 months? And then what we've been talking about, like, I'll have a task list, I'll have an entire thing of, like, okay, these are all the things that need to get done this month. And then I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, what do I feel? What do I feel like I can do today? Like, based on my schedule, based on what I have going on. And that has been scary because I like feeling like I have everything in control, but also so freeing because now I don't feel guilty when I have a night where I like am not working, because I've kind of already allocated that time for myself. But I had spent so long putting these, like, today I'm going to accomplish all of these tasks, and then I don't accomplish them and then I feel guilty. So just really getting clear on, like, what's important and maybe what's not as important, and just giving yourself that space to be able to create it.
Yeah, definitely. And it comes back to that idea of self-care as well, doesn't it? And like you said, you don't have to do everything.
Mhm.
I want to pick up as well what you were saying about the 6 month goals, because I think so often we think about where do we want to be in 5 years, in 10 years, and there's nothing wrong with long-term goals. In fact, I love long-term
Yeah.
planning, but you need those shorter term goals as well. As you said, right, where do I want my business to be in 6 months? Where do I want to be in 6 months? Because it's all very well, I think, saying, I want to be having a 6, 7 figure business in 5 years' time. But
Mhm.
we need to backpedal from that, because you need to break down the 6 monthly steps almost
Mhm.
to get to that 5 yearly goal. And your goal might not be a 6, 7 figure salary. It might be that you reach however many people with your business or with your service, or that you, I don't know, whatever your goal is. But we need that breakdown. And I guess
Yeah.
that then comes back to what we were saying as well about those metrics. And if we start breaking down goals into like 3, 6 months or what have you, we're going down to goals which matter to us, as opposed to being led by continually thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't made this much money yet, and that
Mhm.
person has, and I haven't got this many Instagram followers. Instead, what you're focusing on is, well, no, I didn't get an extra 500 subscribers this month, or an extra 500 people in my Facebook group. But what I did do is I had this brilliant conversation with somebody, and I know that they're going to sign up to my program next month because they're on that pathway to do that. Or I had that conversation with somebody and they have referred me to their friend, and their friend has got in contact, and now I've got a new lead or a new client or what have you.
Mhm.
And how rewarding does that feel, knowing that you have got that accomplishment as opposed to thinking to yourself, oh, I don't have an extra 500 people on Twitter or,
Yeah.
whatever your platform is.
Yeah. Well, and because it feels so frustrating when that's the place that I found myself in when I was creating metric goals every month, is every month I was disappointed because if I didn't hit those goals, which I mean, were pretty often, because again, I wasn't focusing on the things that would actually get me there. I was just focused on like hitting that metric.
Mm-hmm.
So I missed it a lot of the time, no surprise. And so I always just felt this frustration. And I think this way of thinking of like, I love how you talked about, like, let's say, for example, maybe in 2, 3 years, 5 years, you're like, I want to be a speaker at like big conferences and you have all these, places that you want to go. Great. Let's start with you just like pitching yourself to a podcast. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
great will you feel when you've pitched yourself and you've been on your first podcast and you know and you trust the process that I know that if I keep showing up and doing this, like, that stage or that conference that I'm going to be at is going to be so much closer when I can just continue doing this work that's going to get me there, rather than, oh, I have to, all these other things that you could like work on and focus on. It's like focusing on those core things. And it feels so much better. We have so much more space to allow things to actually happen for us. For me, for example, when I would focus so tightly on a goal, like I'm going to hit this metric or I'm going to hit this thing, I would squeeze all of the creativity and all of the other things out of it because I was so focused on like just hitting that one thing that I wouldn't notice like what you were saying, the conversations that you have with someone who, like, that possibility could open up so many different things for you, or just like the space of being able to reward yourself that, like, oh wow, I pitched myself to my first podcast, like that's huge. I got over all of my like fears of all of that. Like, we give ourselves so much more space to be able to actually grow in our business when we stop thinking about it so much as like need to hit all of this right now in this month. And like you said, kind of break down, where is it that I want to go, what should I be focusing on, and then how can I celebrate the heck out of every single thing that I'm doing that's helping me get there.
Absolutely. And how can I learn from everything that I'm doing as well? Because as you said, if you want to, talk at a conference or be a guest speaker at something in a few years' time, well, what can you learn by going on somebody's podcast? Or what can you
Mm-hmm.
learn by recording yourself and putting that recording on YouTube, or starting a podcast yourself, or whatever it is? What can you learn from that? And I guess that links back to the metrics, that somebody might be thinking, well, I might record myself and put it on YouTube and only 10 people saw it, so what was the point? But actually, through watching it back, what did you learn about the
Mm-hmm.
way that you speak, about your intonation?
Yeah, like your recording preferences, like maybe you really like being on video and you didn't know that. Maybe you don't like being on video. And I think like even just you'll get so much stronger with any content you create. Whether it's showing up on a podcast, showing up on your Instagram, showing up in newsletters, doesn't matter if one people read it, two people read it. None of that really matters, because every time you create content, you learn more about
Yes,
yourself. You learn more about your message, your vision, like where you want to be. So it's like flipping that focus from like it really doesn't matter how many people are seeing it. It's helpful when you get some feedback from people, but honestly, you shouldn't really base your business just based on other people's feedback anyway either. Like, it should be based on like what feels right for you and like what content feels natural. And it's like those are the things, if you can just like get comfortable with putting yourself out there in that way and celebrating that and focusing on that as your goals, and just trusting that in time the numbers will come.
yes.
Like, it will come, but you just have to keep showing up.
Absolutely. So I guess that leads me on really nicely to my next question of, do you have any business goals yourself that you're currently working on that you want to share with us right now?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm in the middle of embracing this way of living. So this is kind of, I'm learning this as I go. But so right now, like I mentioned, every day I created a Trello board for myself for the month with like, I have my 6 month goals, I have my like monthly goals, and then I have like the tasks, just like the random tasks that have to get done. But I'm trying really hard of like, I'm one, embracing that I don't have a normal schedule. Like, I think for a long time, I always had this idea that I was going to like work on my business during these certain hours during the day. But sometimes I find that I'm most productive at like 7 p.m. until 10 or 11. And I'm learning to embrace that. I'm getting things done without putting that timeline and pressure on myself, which ironically, I've worked on things more because I don't have a timeline and pressure on myself. I've noticed that I've actually like worked on some of these tasks more frequently. But I'd say like really over the next 6 months, the thing I'm really focusing on is just really growing my podcast. That's kind of been number one. Working with more one-on-one coaching clients and just continuing to book more photo shoots. So the things that I'm doing that feel really good to me and just kind of going all in on those three main things, but breaking them down into timelines that actually like make sense.
Brilliant. I think those are some fantastic goals, and particularly the podcast, just because I don't live in California, so I can't take advantage of your photography services. But the podcast,
Yeah.
I'm excited to see where that goes, and look forward to the next 6 months worth of episodes and beyond. So then what would you say is your key takeaway for our listeners from this episode?
Yeah. So I'd say if after listening to this, if you can take away like one thing from this conversation, I would hope that it's that remembering that growing a business is really a long-term effort. We're doing this because of a long-term, like who we want to be, the life that we want to have. And so remembering that you don't have to complete all these big projects, all these big dreams, all of these visions that you have. It's so important to give yourself space to dream them and think of them and imagine them, but also take it from someone who's done this time and time again, like don't feel like they need to all happen right now. Like give yourself grace in realizing that. And instead of, again, focusing on these metrics and these things that are in other people's hands, right? How many people are seeing things? How many people are consuming your content? Flipping that script and just figuring out, like showing up and trusting that I'm going to get stronger in whatever it is that I want to be doing and showing up. And I'm going to have fun while I'm doing it because I'm not putting that pressure on myself of how many people need to see it. I'm just letting myself explore and get more comfortable doing what I'm doing. So just give yourself that grace and expand your deadlines. Like remember that it's a long-term effort.
Yes, be kind to yourself, and be kind to yourself is what I'm hearing. There. Absolutely. So where can listeners find out more about you?
Yeah. So, well, if you enjoyed this conversation, so I do have a podcast. You can find me at She Calls Her Shots, and it's on pretty much every platform. But if you are growing a business, if this is something that you're kind of interested in, I do have a free workshop that I'd love to invite you to. So it's called Planning for Profit. And in that, we're diving deep into the mindset, the financial, and some business strategies that are really helpful to kind of build that foundation of growing a business. So, I understand how important all three of these aspects are. So it's a free workshop, but we really kind of dive deep into a lot. I think the feedback I've heard from people also is the mindset around like personal mindset and then financial mindset part of the workshop has been really beneficial. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can just find that at shecallshershots.com/profit plan.
Brilliant. And we'll get all that linked down in the show notes. Well, Krista, thank you so much for joining us today. I have had so much fun. I have learned so much from you as well. So I really, really hope that our listeners and our audience have as well. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Bloggers Creating Courses. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, leave a rating and a review. Ratings and reviews help us to reach more people who want to build and scale their online course, so you're really helping to widen the support for our blogging community. To catch all of the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at VeritySongon. I'll see you next time. Happy content creating.